You could smell the money in the air that night. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and a sea of gowns so expensive they looked like they had been flown in straight from Paris. The guests walked as if they owned the world, because in many ways they did. But tucked between the tables, moving quietly with a tray in her hands, was Emily Carter. Most people never noticed her. To them, she was just part of the furniture, a server in a starched uniform, pouring wine, refilling water, smiling on cue. Invisible. Emily had worked dozens of these charity galas, the kind where the wealthy congratulated themselves on generosity, writing checks big enough to impress each other, but small enough to forget by morning. For her, it was another 16-hour shift, sore feet, a paycheck that would barely cover rent, and a gnawing reminder that she was living a life she never asked for. Because Emily hadn't always been a waitress. 4 years earlier, she had been a dancer, a prodigy, people once called her. She lived for the stage lights, the music that made her heart race, the way an audience held its breath right before she moved. But life has a cruel way of cutting dreams short. Her father's business collapsed, medical bills piled up after his heart attack, and someone had to hold the family together. Emily traded ballet shoes for black sneakers, rehearsals for restaurant shifts, and applause for the sound of clinking glasses. Still, sometimes when she closed her eyes between serving tables, she could feel it again. The phantom pulse of music in her veins, the echo of a stage that once belonged to her. That night, as she balanced a tray of champagne flutes, she didn't know her life was about to collide with someone who saw her not as invisible, but as a target. Someone whose arrogance would try to turn her humiliation into entertainment. And it all began with a single stare across the ballroom. Emily felt it before she even saw him. That kind of stare that doesn't glance past you, but lingers, too sharp, too heavy. She looked up, and her stomach tightened. Logan Whitmore. She didn't need an introduction. The name was stitched across half the skyscrapers in Manhattan. Son of a real estate empire, heir to a fortune so large he could burn $100 bill just to light a cigar and not think twice. Handsome in that polished, empty way, tanned skin, perfect hair, a watch worth more than her car. Everything about him screamed entitlement. He lounged back in his chair like the whole room belonged to him, laughing with his friends, a glass of champagne dangling carelessly in his hand. On one side was his fiancée, Veronica, a woman with flawless skin and a smile that looked more like a weapon than a gesture of kindness. On the other side were his two shadows, men who laughed at every word he said, as if their paychecks depended on it, and then his eyes locked on Emily. She was refilling water glasses, steady hands, polite smile, doing her best to be invisible. But Logan wasn't seeing her as a server. He was looking at her the way someone might look at a bug crawling across their table, curious, amused, but with a kind of cruelty underneath. "Look at this one," he said loudly enough for half the table to hear, tilting his chin toward her. His voice carried a lazy arrogance. "They all move the same, like little machines wound up with a key." Veronica laughed lightly, like it was all harmless fun. "Don't be cruel, darling. She's just doing her job." But the smirk on Logan's face said otherwise. Emily kept her smile fixed, though her jaw tightened. She poured the last glass, straightened up, and turned to leave. Be invisible, she reminded herself. Don't give him the satisfaction. But Logan wasn't done. His voice cut through the chatter around them like a knife. "Excuse me," he called out. Emily turned back, tray balanced against her hip. "Yes, sir." He pointed at the tablecloth. A single drop of water shimmered against the white fabric, no bigger than the head of a pin. "You missed a spot." The words hung in the air, absurd and sharp, laced with condescension. His friends chuckled. Veronica sipped her drink, eyes glittering with amusement. Emily felt the heat rise in her cheeks. All day she had endured dismissive waves, fake smiles, people looking through her like glass. But this was deliberate, a tiny cruelty meant to remind her of her place. She swallowed hard, steadying her voice. "My apologies, sir. I'll take care of it right away." Professional, calm, untouchable. But as she stepped back from the table, she knew something had shifted. Logan wasn't finished, and she had just become his entertainment for the night. The band on stage shifted into something sharper, a tango with pulsing strings and fiery rhythm. Couples at nearby tables turned their heads, some tapping their feet to the beat. The room seemed alive with the music. Logan leaned back, his smirk widening as if the sound had given him an idea. He swirled his champagne lazily, then set the glass down with a deliberate click that made Emily pause mid-step. "You know," he said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "I wonder if any of these people actually know what passion looks like anymore." He gestured vaguely to the ballroom, his voice dripping with mock boredom. Everyone's stiff, lifeless, going through the motions. Then his gaze landed back on Emily, sharp, unblinking. "I'll bet you've never felt a real moment of passion in your life, have you?" Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. Years of service work had taught her silence was safer than honesty. But Logan wasn't looking for an answer. He was looking for a show. He pushed back his chair and stood, the tailored lines of his tuxedo cutting through the crowd like a spotlight. He towered over the table, his voice now carrying with theatrical flair. "I dare you," he said, pointing directly at Emily, "to dance with me, right here, right now, to this." The music swelled behind his words, as if on cue. Heads turned, conversations froze, the ballroom held its breath. Emily stood frozen, her tray suddenly heavy in her hands. Did he just dare her in front of all these people? Veronica gave a soft laugh, feigning protest. "Logan, don't be ridiculous," she purred, though her eyes gleamed with excitement. This was entertainment she hadn't expected. But Logan was already reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a sleek wallet and slid out a check with a flourish, scribbling a figure onto it before holding it high for the crowd to see. $10,000, he announced, "for the Children's Hospital. That's what I'll donate if this young lady can dance this song with me and not fall flat on her face." Gasps rippled through the room, a challenge, a humiliation dressed up as generosity. Emily's chest tightened. $10,000 wasn't just money, it was rent, medical bills, breathing room, but more than that, it was bait. He didn't want to help Charity. He wanted to make her stumble, to laugh at her expense, to remind everyone that she was nothing more than the help. Her manager, Mrs. Peterson, was already rushing forward, whispering urgently, "Emily, go back to the kitchen. Don't do this, please." Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to retreat into the safety of invisibility. But then she caught Logan's expression. That smug certainty, that cruel amusement. And something deep inside her shifted. For the first time that night, she thought of the stage she had lost, the music she still dreamed of, the years she had been forced to swallow her pride. Her tray shook slightly as she set it down on the service stand. The room went still, watching. Emily lifted her chin. Her voice came steady, calm, but louder than she expected. "Fine," she said. "I accept." For a moment, no one moved. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation, even the music itself seemed to fade beneath the weight of Emily's words. She had said yes. Logan's eyebrows lifted in mock surprise before twisting back into that smug grin. "Excellent," he boomed, clapping his hands once. "A little spirit, I like it." The tables around them buzzed with whispers. Guests leaned in, hungry for spectacle. This was better than any speech or auction item. They were about to watch a waitress humiliate herself for everyone's amusement. Mrs. Peterson gripped Emily's arm, her voice frantic but low. "Emily, you don't have to do this. He's baiting you. Walk away now, please." But Emily barely heard her. Her eyes stayed locked on Logan's, steady and unflinching. She could see what he saw when he looked at her, someone beneath him, someone to step on. And she knew if she backed down now, she would never forgive herself. Slowly, she set her silver tray on a nearby stand. The crowd hushed, sensing something was happening. With careful precision, she untied the apron at her waist. She folded it once, twice, her hands calm, deliberate, before placing it neatly beside the glasses of champagne. It was such a small act, and yet it felt monumental. She was shedding the uniform that made her invisible, refusing the role he wanted to trap her in. Then she glanced down at her shoes. Black, clunky, built for comfort during endless hours on her feet. Not for dancing, not for the girl she used to be. She slipped them off, one by one, the dull thud against the carpet echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She wasn't retreating, she was stepping forward. Emily straightened her posture, suddenly taller, without the weight of servitude pressing her down. The air in the ballroom shifted. No longer just a server, she looked like something else entirely. Someone who belonged in the spotlight. Nathan Crowe, the young photographer drifting near the edges of the crowd, raised his camera. Through his lens, he saw it clearly. This wasn't humiliation, this was transformation. Logan, basking in the attention, extended his hand with exaggerated charm. "Shall we?" he said, his voice dripping with mock chivalry. Emily didn't take it. She walked past him, stepping barefoot onto the small space between the tables that had suddenly become her stage. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. In that darkness, she could almost smell the old wooden floors of rehearsal halls, hear the faint rustle of stage curtains, feel the ghost of who she once was. When she opened her eyes again, the fire was back. She looked at Logan, her voice steady, almost daring. "Ready when you are." The band struck a sharper note, the tango swelling with heat and urgency. Every eye in the ballroom was fixed on the small patch of carpet that had turned into an unlikely stage. Logan strode toward Emily with the swagger of a man convinced he had already won. He grabbed her hand, pulling her into the rigid frame of a ballroom dancer. His grip was too tight, his posture stiff, the way someone moves when they've memorized the steps but never felt the music. Emily let him lead at first. Her body followed his push and pull, her face unreadable. To the onlookers, she seemed like any other server caught in over her head. Obedient, nervous, outmatched. Logan smirked at his friends, a silent watch this. The first few steps were clumsy by design. Logan pushed forward, forcing her back, his polished shoes gliding with practiced arrogance. He thought the game was his to control. Around them the crowd chuckled softly, expecting to see her stumble any second now. But inside, Emily was listening. Not to him, but to the music. The rhythm seeped into her bones, the familiar pulse she had once lived for. She felt the strings tug at her chest, the percussion driving her feet. For the first time in years, she wasn't holding a tray, wasn't invisible. She was a dancer again. She let him lead through a basic turn, 1 step, 2, 3, and then, on the 4th beat, something inside her shifted. Her shoulders straightened, her core tightened, and the hand resting lightly on his back pressed with unexpected strength. She moved, not as his follower, but as his equal. Logan's smirk flickered just for a heartbeat. Emily's eyes lit with a fire he couldn't read. For a moment, the room no longer smelled of champagne and lilies. It smelled of resin and wood, of rehearsal halls, of possibility. Logan pushed forward again, expecting her to falter. But this time, she didn't just follow. She anticipated. She matched his step with precision so sharp it caught him off guard. His frame faltered, his jaw tightening as he fought to keep control. The crowd grew quieter, their amusement slipping into curiosity. Something wasn't going the way they had expected. Emily's bare feet slid against the carpet with a grace hidden beneath years of long shifts and sensible shoes. Her body spoke a language most of them had forgotten existed. She wasn't just moving through steps, she was telling a story. And though Logan didn't know it yet, the story was no longer his. The tango swelled, a heartbeat of strings and percussion, and suddenly Emily wasn't just keeping up, she was alive. Logan tightened his grip, trying to force her back into his rhythm, but she met his pressure with equal strength. Her movements sharpened, her frame no longer pliant but charged with control. Every step she took was deliberate, confident, electric. At first, Logan thought it was a fluke. He pushed harder, adding a flourish he had learned in one of his expensive private lessons. But instead of stumbling, Emily spun out of it seamlessly, her body carving the music into something breathtaking. The crowd gasped as she hooked her leg in a daring accent, a move no beginner would ever know. Logan faltered, just for a split second, but it was enough. And in that split second, Emily seized it. Her eyes burned with a fire he couldn't name. The years of sacrifice, the rejection letters, the endless nights serving people who looked right through her, all of it poured out in her body, each movement fueled by something deeper than technique. She wasn't dancing for him, she wasn't dancing for the check he had waved in her face, she was dancing for herself, for the girl she used to be, for the woman she refused to let die in silence. The ballroom shifted. Laughter gave way to silence. Whispers faded to awe. People leaned forward, their champagne flutes forgotten, as the waitress in black socks transformed into something no one could ignore. Nathan Crow's camera clicked furiously from the edge of the floor, capturing the moment her back arched in perfect line, her hair brushing the air as she moved with impossible grace. Through his lens, he no longer saw a server, he saw a star reborn. Logan's face flushed, sweat dotted his forehead. He was trying to lead, but it was obvious now he wasn't in control anymore. His partner wasn't just following his steps, she was rewriting them. Every beat of the music pulled her higher, stronger, freer. And with every movement, Logan shrank. By the middle of the dance, it was no longer the air of a billion-dollar empire commanding the room. It was Emily Carter, and the ballroom knew it. The tango roared toward its crescendo, and Emily let herself go. Her bare feet skimmed the carpet like it was a stage polished for her alone. Her body spoke in curves and sharp lines, every movement answering the music with a precision that was both technical and raw. Logan, once so sure of himself, was unravelling. His steps grew clumsy, jerky, his polished composure slipping with every beat. He tried to force her back under his control, but she twisted free, guiding him instead, her frame stronger, her timing unshakable. For the first time in his life, Logan Whitmore wasn't leading, he was being led. And the crowd saw it. Gasps turned into murmurs. Murmurs melted into stunned silence. The glittering guests who had been eager for her failure now leaned forward, eyes wide, watching the impossible happen. Emily dipped low, her hair brushing the floor, then rose with a grace that stole the air from the room. She circled him, sharp footwork slicing the floor, driving him back step by step until his smirk was gone, replaced by the red flush of panic. Nathan's camera clicked in a steady rhythm, catching every second. The waitress turned warrior, the air turned fool. He knew he was documenting the story of the night, maybe the story of the year. And then, with the music racing toward its final chord, Emily seized the ending. She spun away from Logan, her arms cutting the air like wings, her chest lifted, her chin high. She struck a pose that was pure defiance and pure beauty all at once. The last note cracked through the ballroom like a thunderclap. Silence. For a heartbeat, maybe two, no one moved. Logan stood in the centre of the floor, breathing hard, humiliated, small. Then it began, one pair of hands clapping, then another, and then the room erupted. Not polite applause, not the half-hearted claps of social obligation, but a roar. A standing ovation that rolled through the ballroom like a wave, crashing over Emily in thunderous approval. It had been years since she'd heard that sound, but she knew it instantly. The applause wasn't for a waitress, it wasn't for a dare, it was for a dancer. And in that moment, Emily Carter wasn't invisible anymore. She was unforgettable. The applause thundered through the ballroom, echoing against crystal chandeliers and marble walls. Emily stood tall in the centre, her chest heaving, her bare feet planted firm on the carpet. For the first time in years, she felt the roar of an audience soak into her skin, lifting her higher than she ever thought she could stand. But while the crowd cheered, Logan's face twisted. The red flush of humiliation burned across his cheeks. He wasn't hearing applause, he was hearing judgment, and it was aimed at him. His hands trembled as he yanked the check from his pocket again, his movements sharp, violent. With a flick of his wrist, he threw it at her feet. The paper fluttered down like an insult dressed as generosity. "There's your tip," he spat, his voice venomous, his charm gone. "Take it. That's what you wanted, isn't it? A little payday for a cheap show?" The room fell silent. The joy of a moment ago curdled into discomfort. Guests shifted uneasily in their chairs, realising the joke wasn't funny anymore. Emily stared at the check lying on the carpet. $10,000. A sum that could change her life. Rent, medical bills, food. The desperate part of her mind screamed to bend down, to pick it up, to swallow just one more insult for survival. But then she looked up. She met Logan's eyes, and in them she saw nothing but contempt. To take that money would be to agree with him, that her worth could be measured, bought, tossed at her feet. And in that instant she knew. Emily lifted her chin, her voice calm but cutting enough to slice through the heavy silence. "I think you misunderstand," she said. "I didn't dance for your money." The words hung in the air, sharp as glass. "I danced for me." A murmur rippled through the crowd, not of laughter but of awe. She didn't move toward the check. She didn't even glance at it again. Instead, she stepped back, away from the crumpled paper on the floor, and walked off the dance space with her head held high. No rush, no scurry, just quiet, unshakable dignity. The applause didn't return this time, but the silence said more. Everyone in that room would remember the image, the heiress's fiancé left standing, furious and small, while the waitress walked away from a fortune with more grace than all of them combined. Emily had reclaimed more than a spotlight. She had reclaimed herself. The ballroom stayed frozen long after Emily disappeared through the service door, her apron folded neatly over her arm, her shoes dangling from her hand. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to clap again or pretend nothing had happened. Logan stood abandoned at the centre, the check still on the floor, his pride shredded in front of the very people whose approval he craved most. But the night wasn't over. From the edge of the room, Nathan Crowe lowered his camera, his heart pounding. He had caught it all: the dare, the transformation, the ovation, the refusal. Through his lens, it wasn't just an awkward scene at a gala. It was a story people would feel. By morning they did. The first photo hit Twitter just after sunrise. Emily barefoot, striking her final pose, eyes blazing with defiance. Within minutes, it spread. Then came the video clips, shaky phone footage from guests who hadn't been able to resist recording. The story unfolded frame by frame: the arrogant dare, the unexpected brilliance, the check at her feet, the walk away. By 8 o'clock, the hashtag Gala Dancer was trending nationwide. Memes, think pieces, reactions poured in. She didn't just refuse his money, she refused his power. This is what dignity looks like. Somebody get this woman a stage. Emily woke up to a phone buzzing non-stop on her nightstand. Missed calls, dozens of texts, notifications piling in faster than she could swipe. A friend had sent her a link. Her own face stared back at her from the homepage of a major news outlet, frozen mid-dance, her story told to millions. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the cracked screen, her heart racing. Yesterday she'd been invisible, today she was everywhere. Support poured in. A stranger launched an online fundraiser labelled "A Tip Jar for the Dancer Who Said No." The goal was $10,000, the same amount Logan had thrown at her like trash. By noon it had already tripled. Emily scrolled through the comments, tears stinging her eyes. This woman gave me courage. I needed this reminder that some things can't be bought. I want my daughters to see her dance. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. She wasn't just a server anymore. She wasn't just a forgotten dancer. She had become a symbol, and symbols are hard to silence. By the afternoon, Emily could barely recognise her own life. Reporters were calling, strangers were emailing. People she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out, all because of a dance she never planned to perform. And then came the knock at her door. When she opened it, a woman in a tailored suit introduced herself. She was an assistant to a well-known Broadway choreographer who had been at the gala that night. He hadn't come for charity auctions or champagne. He had come out of obligation, ready to leave early. But then he had seen her, seen the way she moved, the fire she carried, the way she turned humiliation into triumph. He wanted to meet her. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, the card trembling in her hand. For years, she had convinced herself her dream was gone, buried under bills and exhaustion. And now, out of nowhere, the door she thought was locked forever was cracked open again. She showed up the next morning at the studio, nervous in worn-out sneakers and her best sweater. The room smelled of old wood and fresh polish. Mirrors stretched across the wall, reflecting back a version of herself she hadn't seen in years. The choreographer studied her quietly, then finally said, "That night you weren't just dancing, you were telling the truth. That's what audiences crave. That's what I want on my stage." Tears blurred her vision. She nodded, unable to find the right words. For the first time in so long, Emily felt something she thought she had lost: hope. The gala had been meant to break her, to remind her of her place. Instead, it had given her a stage she never expected. The viral videos, the headlines, the support from strangers, those were powerful. But what mattered most was this. She had proved to herself that she was still a dancer, still worthy, still whole. That night, Logan had tried to buy her dignity with a check. She had left it on the floor. And in doing so, she discovered something money could never touch. Because the real currency of a life well lived isn't dollars, it's courage. And Emily Carter had plenty of it. Lesson: true worth can't be bought with money or status. Real power comes from dignity, courage, and the strength to stand by who you are, even when the world tries to humiliate you. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I'm truly grateful for your time. I wish you luck and kindness in whatever you're facing right now. Before we close this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon, right here on Rain Inside.